What if I told you that right now, while you are watching this video, 600 million Africans are sitting in complete darkness? No lights to read by, no power for their phones, no electricity for hospitals to save lives. But what if I also told you that in the next 5 years, the biggest money move in human history, 58 billion, is about to change all of that forever? I am not just talking about turning on lights, right? This is about turning on an entire continent. And if you understand what's really happening here, you are looking at an investment opportunity of a lifetime. So welcome back to Africa Today. If you are new here, my name is Elvin Jik, and it might interest you to know that on here we cover everything from investments in Africa to geopolitics in Africa. And today we are diving into the most ambitious infrastructure project in African history, bigger than anything China has ever done on our continent. You know that Swahili proverb that says haraka haraka haina baraka, that is, rushing brings no blessings? Well, for 60 years, Africa has been patient, waiting for the lights to come on. But now the World Bank, African Development Bank, and 30 African governments have said enough is enough. Mission 300 isn't just a catchy name. It's actually a mission to connect 300 million Africans to electricity by 2030. But here's what nobody is talking about. So let me put this in perspective for you. Nigeria alone has over 87 million people living with no electricity. That's more than the entire population of Germany sitting in darkness every single night. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 80 million without power. Ethiopia, 56 million. Together, just these three countries represent 1/3 of everyone on Earth who lacks electricity. Think about that. 1/3 of the world's energy poverty is concentrated in just 3 African nations. But here's where it gets interesting and why smart money is paying attention. So in a minute, I'll show you, go-getters, why this changes everything in African development and creates opportunities that most investors don't even know that exist. Ready for this? Sub-Saharan African alone represents 83% of everyone on Earth who doesn't have electricity. That's not a typo. Nearly 9 out of 10 people in the world living without electricity are African. Now, conventional wisdom says this is a problem. But what if I told you, go-getters, that the smartest investors in the world would see this as the biggest investment opportunity in human history? So here's why. The World Bank and African Development Bank have committed $58.2 billion, not million, but billion with a B. The Islamic Development Bank added $2.65 billion. The Asian Infrastructure Development Bank threw in $1.5 billion. Who knows who might be next? But wait, there's more to this story that will blow your mind. This isn't charity money, right? This is investment capital expecting massive returns. Because when you electrify 300 million people, you don't just turn on lights, but you turn on economies. So here's where the story actually takes a turn nobody saw coming. Mission 300 isn't just about connecting people to old-style electrical grids. They are building something completely different. A technology-agnostic approach combining grid extension, mini-grids, and solar standalone systems. So what does that mean in plain English? That simply means they are leapfrogging over the mistakes of the developed world. So while Europe and America spent 100 years building centralized power systems, Africa is running straight to distributed renewable energy networks. It's like going from no phones to smartphones directly, skipping landlines completely. But here's the part that should make every entrepreneur and investor watching this take notes. The real reason behind this revolution is something nobody's talking about, and we'll get to that in a moment. So before that, let me quickly tell you about a village in Tanzania, right? So 6 months ago, families were spending about $15 alone per night on kerosene for lighting. So if you do the maths, that's about $180 per year and which is about 80% of their annual income. Just for terrible light that made their children sick. Remember, we are talking about rural areas, right? So in such areas, $180 is a lot. So today, that small village has solar mini grids, and families now spend about $5 per month on electricity that powers lights, phones, radios, and even small businesses. So they are now capable of saving $120 per year and increasing their productivity by about 300%. So multiply that by about 300 million people. You will notice that we are looking at the biggest economic transformation in modern African history. But here's what makes me excited as someone who believes in African potential. This isn't just about rural electrification, alright? We are talking about powering hospitals that can finally refrigerate vaccines, for instance, schools where children can study after dark, and small businesses that can operate beyond daylight hours. Are you beginning to see why the World Bank calls this economic transformation at scale? So here's where Mission 300 is absolutely brilliant, and it's completely different from any other project you've ever heard of. Bear in mind that they are not just building infrastructure and hoping people use it. They've actually created something called National Energy Compacts, country-specific blueprints with measurable targets and accountability mechanism. Nigeria has to connect X amount of people, and Tanzania, for instance, has specific electrification targets. So each country has skin in the game without their own money and their own deadlines. But it gets even better. Roughly half of that $58 billion is going straight for renewable energy. Decentralized mini-grids that don't depend on any centralized, massive infrastructure. And the other half is building the backbone that connects everything together. So the real deal is they are building tomorrow's energy system today while the whole world is still stuck with yesterday's technology. Now, I already know what some of you are thinking as usual, right? That sounds too good to be true. Yeah, and you're right to be skeptical, right? So let me quickly give you some contrarian views that critics are raising. First, they say $58 billion sounds huge, but it is not actually enough. Now, the International Energy Agency estimates Africa needs $120 billion annually for universal energy access. So in reality, this is just half of 1 year's requirement. Secondly, critics point out that previous energy initiatives in Africa have failed spectacularly. Billions have been spent with limited results. So they are asking what makes Mission 300 different. Thirdly, they are pointing out the governance issue. How do you ensure this money doesn't disappear into corrupt pockets like so many development funds before? All those concerns are valid, but here's what the critics are missing. Now, we should understand that Mission 300 is something revolutionary that has learned from previous mistakes, or rather, failures. So this isn't your grandfather's development project, alright? First, they are using a pay-for-results model, meaning that countries only get funded when they meet specific electrification targets. So no results, no money. So secondly, they have created what is called the African Energy Regulatory Index, a real-time monitoring system that tracks every single connection, every kilowatt hour generated, every dollar spent. Thirdly, and this is huge, they are prioritizing private sector investment. About 60% of the funding is structured to attract private investments, not just government spending money. So they have tried as much as possible to make the government less involved in this project so that it is going to minimize corruption or mismanagement as much as possible, right? But here's the part that should make every African and every investor take notice. I want us to look at it this way. This isn't just about energy, alright? Let's look at it as Africa finally controlling a strategic resource that the entire world needs: clean, renewable energy. What happens when Africa becomes the world's renewable energy superpower? Or you think that isn't possible? What happens when European countries need African solar power to meet their climate targets? I want you to ponder on that while we proceed. So let me quickly paint you a picture of what Africa looks like in 2030 if Mission 300 succeeds, which I believe will. A farmer in rural Kenya uses solar-powered irrigation systems to triple his crop yields. He exports vegetables to Dubai and London because he has cold storage powered by renewable energy. A tech entrepreneur in Lagos, for instance, builds the next fintech unicorn because her entire city has reliable electricity 24/7. A doctor in rural Mali is capable of saving lives because her clinic has constant power for life support, equipment, and vaccine refrigeration. A student in Dar es Salaam studies engineering through online courses because he has internet and electricity at home. So this is about building the foundation for the African Renaissance that we've all been waiting for. So for African diaspora watching this is your moment to be part of something historic. And for investors, this is a ground floor for the biggest investment infrastructure transformation since China's Belt and Road Initiative. So if you're wondering how to get involved, don't you worry, I've got you covered as always. For larger investors, look for renewable energy infrastructure funds focused on Africa. Companies like Solar Power Africa, Solar Now, and M-Copper are already positioning themselves for this boom. For smaller budgets, consider Africa Renewable Energy ETFs, or simply funds that focus on energy access. Your investment could help power the transformation while generating returns. But more importantly, this is more of how we see Africa. I want us to look at it this way. We are not just a continent that needs help, but we are becoming the continent that the world needs. When Europe needs clean energy, they come to Africa. When the world needs sustainable development models, they will study what we build with Mission 300. So what I want to know from you go-getters is if you are going to be part of this story or you're just going to be watching it from a distance. Remember the Swahili proverb I mentioned earlier that rushing brings no blessings? For decades, we waited patiently for our turn. We watched other continents develop while we remained in darkness. But patience isn't passivity when you are building something extraordinary. Mission 300 proves that when Africa moves with purpose and unity, we don't just catch up, but we leapfrog ahead. With that said, thanks for watching this video and hope to see you on my next one, as always.